When Dr. Catherine Shin told me I had 8 weeks to live, I knew exactly who to call: my son. But I never imagined he'd laugh when I asked for help. I'm Tom Harrison, 72, and 6 months ago, I was given 8 weeks to live. I spent 42 years under the hoods of cars, saving every penny for my family, for him. They say every parent would die for their child. But what do you do when your child would rather watch you die than give back what you gave them?
My fingers went numb against the vinyl armrest as she turned the monitor toward me, pointing at dark patches that looked like storm clouds gathering over my heart. "Mr. Harrison, these blockages are severe," she said, her voice carrying that practiced gentleness doctors use when delivering terminal news. "Without immediate surgery, your heart will fail within 8 weeks. I'm sorry, but we're looking at a quadruple bypass. It's your only option." 8 weeks. 56 days. That's all that stood between me and a pine box in Riverside Cemetery where my wife Sarah had been waiting for me these past 12 years. The antiseptic smell of the examination room suddenly felt suffocating, like breathing through wet cotton. "How much?" The words scraped past my dry throat. "The total cost is $285,000. Full payment is required before we can schedule the procedure. It's hospital policy." My Samsung phone felt like a brick as I pulled it from my pocket. The banking app loaded with agonizing slowness, each second stretching like melted taffy. When the numbers finally appeared, $18,742.36. My entire life savings after 42 years of running Harrison's auto repair, bleeding oil and sweat into every engine block, every transmission rebuild. There must be payment plans, insurance options. Your insurance covers basic cardiac care, not major surgery. Dr. Chen's expression softened, but her words remained clinical. "I understand this is difficult, but without payment, there's nothing we can do." If you're watching this and thinking that's not fair, you're right. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to show you how unfair life really gets when family turns their back on you. I stumbled out of the medical building into the blazing Denver afternoon, my chest already tightening with a preview of the pain that would eventually kill me. But as I sat in my rusted Chevy pickup, staring at my phone's contact list, I wasn't thinking about death. I was thinking about 3 years ago when my son, David, had sat across from me at O'Malley's pub spreading real estate listings across the sticky wooden table like a poker hand he was sure would win. "Dad, this is it," he'd said, his green eyes, Sarah's eyes, bright with ambition. "This house in Cherry Creek, it's perfect for Jennifer and the kids. I just need help with the down payment." Cherry Creek, where Denver's elite lived behind manicured hedges and security systems worth more than my truck, where my money had bought my son his slice of the American dream. $267,000. That's what I'd given him. Not gifted, loaned. He'd promised to pay it back within 2 years once his tech startup stabilized. We'd shaken hands over it, man to man, father to son. Now, with 8 weeks ticking down like a bomb in my chest, I needed that promise kept. 3 years ago, I emptied my retirement accounts for my son's happiness. Today, I was about to find out what that sacrifice was really worth. The drive from Cedar Valley Medical to Cherry Creek took 35 minutes through Denver traffic, but my mind traveled backward 3 years to when this journey meant hope instead of desperation. Back then, I'd driven this same route with a cashier's check that represented 4 decades of work, believing I was investing in my family's future. Interstate 25 stretched ahead through the afternoon heat, past the same billboards and strip malls. But everything looked different when you're counting down to death. The country station played Blake Shelton singing about small-town values and family bonds. I switched it off. Silence felt more honest. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I turned onto Bellevue Avenue, entering the world my money had purchased for David. Cherry Creek was everything Harrison's Auto Repair wasn't. Pristine sidewalks without oil stains, trees that looked like they'd been styled by hairdressers, houses that whispered wealth in every architectural detail. The memory crashed over me like ice water. 3 years ago, sitting in O'Malley's pub, David had spread out those real estate photos like treasure maps. The 4-bedroom colonial with its wraparound porch and 3-car garage. The kitchen with granite countertops where Jennifer would cook Sunday dinners. The backyard where my grandchildren would learn to throw a baseball. "Dad, you know I'm good for it," David had said, gripping my weathered hand across the table. "This isn't charity, it's a loan. I'll have your money back with interest once Next Gen Solutions takes off." Next Gen Solutions, his software company that was always 6 months away from the big breakthrough. I'd believed him, because what father doesn't believe in his son's dreams? I'd liquidated everything, the retirement accounts, the bonds Sarah's life insurance had left me, even the small inheritance from my brother Pete, who died in Afghanistan. You watching this right now? Have you ever given everything for someone you loved? Subscribe and drop a comment. This story might save you from making the same mistake I did. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Earl. "You okay, Tom? Saw you at the medical center." Earl knew. The whole neighborhood knew when someone got that particular diagnosis. We'd seen too many friends take that final ride to Cedar Valley Medical and come back with expiration dates stamped on their foreheads. "I'm handling it," I texted back, though handling was a generous description of driving toward a confrontation that would either save my life or destroy what remained of my family. David's house came into view, a monument to my sacrifice. The driveway held his Tesla Model S and Jennifer's Range Rover, both gleaming like showroom models. The lawn was emerald perfection, maintained by a service that cost more monthly than my grocery budget. I parked my paint-chipped Chevy behind the Tesla, feeling like a food stamp at a country club. Through the living room window, I could see the chandelier I'd helped them pick out, throwing rainbow prisms across walls painted in colors like Venetian sunrise and coastal fog. My knock echoed through their solid oak door, wood that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Footsteps approached, measured and unhurried. The door opened to reveal David in designer athleisure, looking like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. At 38, he'd maintained the athlete's build from his college baseball days, while I'd grown thin and gray, carved down by decades of honest labor. "Dad, what brings you here? You usually call." Usually, as if dropping by your son's house required an appointment, as if the man who changed his diapers and taught him to ride a bike needed permission to ring his doorbell. "We need to talk, David. It's important."
The moment my son looked me in the eye and said, "That's not my problem," I realized I'd raised a stranger wearing my DNA. David's living room felt like a furniture showroom, everything positioned for maximum visual impact rather than comfort. I sank into the Italian leather sofa that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, while my son remained standing, a psychological power play I recognized from every customer who'd tried to lowball me at the shop. "Can I get you something? Water? Coffee?" Jennifer's voice floated from the kitchen, polite but distant. She'd never liked me much. I was too blue-collar for her Pinterest-perfect world. "I'm fine," I called back, though fine was the opposite of what I was. David poured himself scotch from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid catching afternoon light through floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't offer me any. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, while he took his time settling into the chair across from me, maintaining that careful distance that said, "Visitor, not family." "So what's this about, Dad? If you need help with the shop, I'm dying." The words hung in the air like smoke. David's glass paused halfway to his lips, and for just a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Concern? Fear? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "What do you mean, dying?" "Heart failure. 8 weeks without surgery. The surgery costs $285,000. He set his glass down with deliberate precision on a coaster that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. That's terrible, Dad. What about insurance? Won't cover it. David, I need you to pay back the loan, the $267,000 I gave you for this house. If you're still watching, you know where this is going, but trust me, it gets worse. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you die for. The transformation in my son's face was immediate and complete. The polite concern evaporated, replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window where he could look out at his perfect lawn instead of at his dying father. That wasn't a loan, Dad. That was a gift, a father helping his son. We shook hands on it being a loan. You promised to pay it back in 2 years. It's been 3. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking in my chest. Do you have that in writing? A contract? Any legal documentation? I have our text messages, you promising to pay me back. Earl Montgomery was there when we discussed it at O'Malley's. He heard everything. Text messages and barroom conversations don't constitute legal agreements. David turned to face me, and the stranger wearing my son's face was complete. Besides, even if it was a loan, I don't have that kind of liquid capital. It's all tied up in the house and investments. Then sell something. Take out a home equity loan. Your cars alone are worth... Are you seriously asking me to destroy my family's financial stability for a surgery that might not even work? His voice rose, and Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of suburban concern. Dad, you're 72. You've lived a good life. A good life? I gave you everything, every penny I'd saved, and now when I needed to save my life, you're telling me I've lived long enough? It's not personal, it's practical. David moved to the door, opening it with corporate efficiency. That money could put my kids through college. It could secure their future. Spending it on a surgery for someone who's already in their 70s, it's just not a good investment. Investment? He'd reduced my life to a line item on a spreadsheet. Get out, he said, his voice flat and final. And don't come back here with this emotional manipulation. If you contact me again about this money, I'll consider it harassment. Jennifer stood beside him, with her hand on his arm in solidarity. Neither of them helped as I struggled to my feet, my chest tightening with each breath. The walk to the door felt endless, each step a reminder that the heart attack that would kill me could come at any moment. You promised, I whispered as I passed him. Promises don't pay mortgages, Dad. The door closed behind me like a coffin lid.
Sometimes the family you choose proves more loyal than the family you're born with, and Earl Montgomery was about to prove that in court. The Black Bear Diner on Colorado Boulevard hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee that could strip paint, same waitress named Dolores who called everyone honey and remembered how you took your eggs. It was here that Earl Montgomery found me the morning after David threw me out, nursing black coffee and staring at nothing. "Tom Harrison, you look like death warmed over." Earl slid into the opposite booth, his 75 years sitting easier on him than my 72 sat on me. Maybe because his son hadn't just signed his death warrant. "Funny you should mention death." I pushed my untouched toast toward him. "Doctor says I've got 8 weeks. David says that's about 8 weeks too many." Earl's weathered face went stone still. In 40 years of friendship, through Vietnam and back, through Sarah's death and his own Martha's cancer, I'd never seen him look quite so dangerous. "Run that by me again?" So I did. Every word of yesterday's conversation, from Dr. Chen's diagnosis to David calling my life a bad investment. Earl listened without interrupting, his jaw working like he was chewing nails. Still watching? Good, because this is where karma starts loading its gun. Subscribe now. You're going to want to see how this ends. "I was there," Earl said when I finished. 3 years ago at O'Malley's. I remember every word that boy said. "Dad, this is a loan. I'll pay you back with interest. 2 years maximum. I remember because I told you not to do it. You did, said I was too trusting. And I was right. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is I heard him make that promise. So did Big Mike behind the bar. So did half the regular Tuesday crowd. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts with surprising efficiency for a man who still used a flip phone until last year. You remember my nephew, the lawyer? Daniel, the one who handled Martha's estate? That's him. He doesn't do family law, but he knows someone who does. Best in Denver, apparently. Expensive, but… He looked at me pointedly. Sometimes you gotta spend money to make money, or in this case, get money. Earl, I've got less than $19,000 to my name. And I've got $30,000 sitting in savings doing nothing but collecting dust. Consider it a loan. A real one, with paperwork and everything. Pay me back when you win. If I win, and if I live long enough to see it? Earl reached across the table and gripped my hand with the strength of a man who'd pulled me out of a rice paddy in '71. You're going to win, Tom, and you're going to live, because I'm going to make damn sure that ungrateful little bastard doesn't get away with this. By afternoon, we were sitting in the law offices of Morrison, Kellogg, and Associates in downtown Denver. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place where justice came with a premium price tag. But Andrea Morrison didn't look like a corporate shark. She looked like someone's grandmother who happened to have a law degree from Harvard and a reputation for making grown men cry on witness stands. Mr. Harrison, Mr. Montgomery. She reviewed the evidence we had assembled, bank statements, text messages, Earl's written testimony. This is one of the strongest breach of contract cases I've seen. The text messages alone are damning. She pulled up one on her computer screen. Dad, I promise I'll pay back every penny within 2 years. This is a loan, not a gift. Thank you for believing in me. That's dated 3 days after the money transfer. Clear acknowledgement of debt, combined with witness testimony and the pattern of promises, your son doesn't have a leg to stand on. How long? I asked, my hand pressed against my chest where the pain had been building all morning. Emergency filing. Given your medical situation, I can have you in court within 3 weeks, maybe sooner if opposing counsel wants to settle. He won't settle, I said. He's too proud. Andrea smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who just spotted lunch. Pride goeth before a fall, Mr. Harrison, and your son is about to fall very, very hard.
Hook. The day the process server knocked on David's door was the day he learned that karma doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it comes with a court summons. The call came at 7:47 p.m. on a Thursday, 2 weeks after I'd filed the lawsuit. I was sitting in my small apartment sorting medications I might never live to finish when my phone lit up with David's number. I let it ring twice while I activated the recording app Andrea had recommended. "What the hell have you done?" No greeting, no pretense of civility, just raw fury crackling through the speaker. "Hello, David. You actually sued me? Your own son? Over money?" "Over my life. The money just happens to be what saves it." I heard glass breaking in the background, probably one of those crystal tumblers he loved so much. Jennifer's voice rose in the distance, shrill with panic about something regarding their accounts. "If this is making you angry, good. It should. Betrayal by blood cuts deepest. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone who's been used by family." "You vindictive old bastard," David snarled. "You couldn't just accept reality, could you? Couldn't just go quietly?" "Go quietly? You mean die quietly? Die without inconveniencing you? That money is my children's future." "That money was my future, my literal future, the difference between living and dying. "I'll fight this," he said, his voice dropping to something venomous. "I'll get the best lawyers. I'll prove it was a gift. You're senile, confused. I'll have you declared mentally incompetent if I have to." "Try it," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "Andrea Morrison is representing me. You might have heard of her. She just won that case against Preston Industries. $40 million judgment." The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Then, "If you go through with this, you're dead to me. You'll never see your grandchildren again, never be part of this family." "David," I said softly, "I'm already dead to you. You made that clear when you called my life a bad investment. The only difference now is whether I die broke or whether I die knowing my son finally faced consequences for his actions." "I hope your surgery fails," he said, and the pure hatred in his voice would have broken my heart if it hadn't already been failing on its own. The line went dead. 3 days later, Earl drove me to the courthouse for the emergency hearing Andrea had managed to schedule. The Lindsay Flanagan courthouse stood like a monument to justice, all columns and limestone, the kind of building that made you believe in right and wrong. David was already there with his lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My son wouldn't look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Thompson." Judge Thompson was 70 if she was a day, with silver hair and eyes that had seen every variation of family destruction Colorado had to offer. She reviewed the case files with the efficiency of someone who could spot bullshit at 1,000 yards. "Mr. David Harrison," she began, her voice carrying the authority of 4 decades on the bench, "do you deny receiving $267,000 from your father?" "No, Your Honor, but—" "Do you deny these text messages are from you promising to repay this money?" David's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, "I don't deny sending them, but the context." "The context seems quite clear." Judge Thompson held up a printed screenshot. Quote, "Dad, I promise this is a loan, not a gift. I will pay back every penny within 2 years." "Mr. Harrison, did you write those words?" "Yes, but—" "And Mr. Montgomery?" The judge turned to Earl, who'd worn his only suit, the one for Martha's funeral. "You were present during the initial discussion of this loan?" "Yes, Your Honor, at O'Malley's Pub on Colfax, March 15th, 2021. David asked Tom for a loan, used that exact word, loan, and promised to repay it once his company stabilized." "And has the company stabilized?" Andrea stood smoothly. "Your Honor, according to public records, Next Gen Solutions was sold to a larger firm 8 months ago for $3.2 million. The gasp that escaped David was audible throughout the courtroom. He'd never told me about the sale, never mentioned that the company I'd believed in, invested in, had made him a millionaire while I was counting pennies for groceries. Judge Thompson's expression hardened. "Mr. Harrison, you sold your company for millions and didn't repay your father? That money was reinvested into your lifestyle based on these financial records," Andrea interrupted, sliding documents across the bench. "2 luxury vehicles, a boat, vacation properties in Aspen and Cabo San Lucas." The judge's gaze could have frozen hell. "I've seen enough."
Watching my son's empire crumble in court was supposed to feel like justice. Instead, it felt like watching my heart break in real time while my actual heart counted down to failure. "Mr. David Harrison," Judge Thompson's voice filled the courtroom with the weight of impending judgment. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, documented promises, witness testimony, and clear demonstration of ability to pay, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff." David shot to his feet,
his lawyer grabbing his arm to keep him from doing something stupid. "Your Honor, this is my father trying to collect a debt you freely acknowledged and have the means to repay?" The judge cut him off with surgical precision. "The court orders immediate judgment in the amount of $267,000, plus legal fees and interest calculated from the original loan date." "That's over $300,000. David's voice cracked like a teenager's. $312,000, to be precise, Andrea said calmly. "Due within 30 days, or the court will authorize seizure of assets, starting with the Cherry Creek property." Jennifer, who'd been sitting in the gallery behind David, let out a sound like a wounded animal. Their 2 kids, my grandchildren I barely knew anymore, Taylor and Mason, sat beside her in their private school uniforms, watching their father's world implode. If you have kids watching this, remember, they learn more from what you do than what you say. Subscribe and share. Someone needs to hear this lesson before it's too late. "Your Honor," David's lawyer stood, straightening his tie nervously. "We'd like to request a payment plan arrangement." "Denied." Judge Thompson's gavel came down with finality. "The plaintiff has 8 weeks to live without this surgery. This is literally a matter of life and death. 30 days, Mr. Harrison. Court is adjourned." The aftermath was chaos. David stormed out, Jennifer trailing behind with the children, but not before Taylor, 14 and too smart for her own good, looked back at me with something like understanding in her eyes. She knew what her father had done. Earl helped me to a bench in the courthouse hallway, my legs shaking from more than just emotion. The chest pain was constant now, a reminder that legal victories meant nothing if my heart gave out before I could use the money. "We won," Earl said, but his celebration was muted. We both knew this was just the beginning. "Grandpa?" I looked up to find Taylor standing there, having somehow slipped away from her parents. She looked so much like Sarah at that age. Same stubborn chin, same eyes that sought too much. "Hey, sweetheart. Is it true? What Dad did?" I could have lied, could have protected her from the ugly truth about her father, but she deserved better than pretty lies. "Yes." She nodded, processing this with a maturity that broke my heart. "I heard him on the phone last week, talking about moving money offshore to accounts you can't touch." Earl and I exchanged glances. "Taylor, are you sure?" "He was in his office. I heard him mention the Cayman Islands, something about protecting assets from the judgment he knew was coming." She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo she had taken of papers on his desk. I thought you should know." Andrea was on the phone within minutes, filing emergency injunctions to freeze David's accounts. But we all knew the truth. If David had been planning this, at least some money was already gone. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal maneuvers and medical appointments. My condition worsened daily, each morning bringing new weakness, new pain. Dr. Chen moved my surgery status to critical. If the money came through, I'd need the procedure within days, or it would be too late. Then Andrea called with news that changed everything. "Tom, we found them, the offshore accounts. David wasn't as clever as he thought. He used the same password for everything. And Taylor, well, let's just say your granddaughter has skills her father doesn't know about." "How much did he hide?" $2 million, from the company sale he never told you about. But here's the interesting part. The transfer was illegal. Wire fraud, tax evasion, attempt to hide assets from a court judgment. He's looking at federal charges. I sat in my small kitchen, staring at the phone like it might bite me. Federal charges? Prison time? 5 to 10 years if convicted. "Tom, I need to know, do you want to pursue this?" My son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man, who'd grown up to call my life a bad investment. "Yes," I said, "pursue everything."
The day they arrested David at his office was the day I learned that justice and revenge taste exactly the same when you're dying. Bitter. The news footage played on every local channel. David Harrison, successful tech entrepreneur, being led from his glass tower office in handcuffs while his employees watched through conference room windows. The FBI doesn't do subtle when they're making a point about white-collar crime. I watched from my hospital bed at Cedar Valley Medical, where I'd been admitted after collapsing at home the previous morning. Dr. Chen had insisted on keeping me under observation. My heart was running on borrowed time, she said. Borrowed time I'd paid for with my son's future. Tom? Jennifer stood in my doorway, looking like she'd aged 10 years and 2 weeks. Designer clothes rumpled, makeup smeared, the perfect suburban mother facade cracked beyond repair. Can I come in? Here's a truth bomb for everyone watching. The people who stand by and let evil happen are just as guilty as those who commit it. If that hits close to home, maybe you need to subscribe and think about your own choices. I nodded, too tired to refuse. She sat in the visitor's chair, clutching her Hermes purse like a life preserver. They froze everything, she said. Every account, every asset, the kids' college funds, our retirement, even my personal checking. We can't buy groceries. There's a food bank on Alameda. Good people there. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Tom, please. David was wrong, but destroying him like this. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself the moment he chose his comfort over my life. He's facing prison time, real prison, not some minimum security camp. Federal prison. Do you understand what you've done? I understand exactly what I've done, I said, the heart monitor beside me beeping faster as my emotions spiked. I've held my son accountable for the first time in his life, something I should have done years ago instead of enabling him with money I couldn't afford to give him. Jennifer started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. The kids, Taylor won't speak to him. She says she's ashamed of him. Mason's being bullied at school. Everyone knows. Part of me wanted to comfort her, the part that remembered her as a young bride, glowing with happiness at their wedding, I'd paid for. But that part was dying along with my heart. Where was this concern when David told me to die quietly? When you stood by and let him throw me out? She had no answer. They never do when the bill comes due. Andrea arrived an hour later with documents that would change everything. The federal prosecutor had offered David a deal, full restitution plus a reduced sentence of 18 months if he cooperated fully and liquidated all hidden assets. He'll have to sell everything, Andrea explained, the house, cars, vacation properties, investments. But you'll get your money, Tom, more than enough for the surgery and recovery. How much more? After the surgery costs, probably another $100,000. The interest and penalties add up. A fortune by my standards. Blood money by any other name. That evening, Taylor came to visit. Earl had been picking her up from school, the only stable adult in her chaos. She sat beside my bed, holding my hand with fingers that trembled slightly. I'm sorry, Grandpa. For what, sweetheart? None of this is your fault. For not saying something sooner. For not standing up to him when he talked about you like you were nothing. You're 14. It wasn't your job to stand up to him. It was his job to be someone worth standing behind. She squeezed my hand tighter. Mom says we're moving to Ohio, living with her parents, starting over. Ohio. 1,000 miles from the grandfather she'd barely known because her father had built walls of privilege between us. Taylor, can I tell you something? The money, the house, the cars, none of that matters. What matters is character, who you are when no one's watching, when it costs you something to do the right thing. Like what you did, even though it meant losing your son? I didn't lose him, sweetheart. I lost him 3 years ago when he took my money. I lost him the day he looked at my death sentence and shrugged. This, I gestured at the hospital room, the monitors, the IV drip, keeping me stable. This is just making it official. She stayed until visiting hours ended, and when she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, I love you, Grandpa, and I'm proud of you. It was worth everything to hear those words.
6 months later, I stood in my son's former home, holding the keys to a life I'd bought with my own money, twice, and wondered if surviving was really the same as living. The surgery was a success. 4 hours on the table, 2 weeks in recovery, and I woke up with a working heart and a hollow chest where my family used to be. Dr. Chen called it a medical miracle, but miracles are supposed to feel better than this. The Cherry Creek house sold at auction for $400,000, more than enough to cover what David owed me. I stood in its empty rooms on a cold December morning, my footsteps echoing off hardwood floors that had once hosted grandchildren I'd never really known. Last chance to subscribe if you haven't already. This story's almost over, but your story? That's still being written. Make sure you're the hero, not the villain. Earl helped me move in. Not because I wanted to live there, the place felt haunted by coulda-beens, but because selling it felt like admitting that my family was truly gone. We carried boxes through rooms that still smelled faintly of Jennifer's expensive perfume and David's cologne, ghosts of a life built on borrowed money and broken promises. You could sell this place, Earl suggested, setting down a box marked kitchen in what used to be David's office. Buy something smaller, take a vacation, hell, take 10 vacations. With what family, I asked, and he had no answer for that. The letter came 3 weeks later, forwarded from the federal detention center where David was serving his 18 months. His handwriting looked different, smaller, more careful, like prison had taught him to take up less space. Dad, I know you won't forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I need you to know that I understand now. In here, when everything's stripped away, the money, the status, the lies I told myself, I finally see what I threw away. You asked for your money back to save your life, and I called it a bad investment. The truth, I was the bad investment. Every dollar you gave me, every sacrifice you made, I wasted it on becoming someone you couldn't even recognize. Taylor writes to me. She tells me you're recovering well. She says you kept the house but donated my office furniture to charity. That made me laugh, the first real laugh I've had in months. You always did have a sense of poetic justice. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for money. I'm not even asking you to write back. I'm just asking you to know that I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry that wants something, but the kind that knows it's too late for wanting. I was your son. You deserved better. David. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Some words come too late to heal, but not too late to hear. Taylor visited for Christmas. Jennifer had remarried some real estate developer in Columbus who treated her kids like his own. Taylor said he was nice, boring, stable. Everything David hadn't been. We sat by the fireplace I'd never imagined I'd own, drinking hot chocolate and not talking about the elephant in every room, the man serving time for choosing money over family. She said, I got into MIT, full scholarship, computer science. That's incredible, sweetheart. I'm going to pay you back for everything, not just the money, but for showing me that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, she said fiercely. You stood up when everyone else sat down. You fought when everyone said to give up. You survived when my dad wanted you to disappear. That night, after she left, I sat in David's former office, now my study, and thought about what we leave behind. Not money or houses or the things we accumulate, but the choices we make when choosing is hard. The stands we take when standing costs everything. I'm 73 now. My heart beats steady and strong, rebuilt with titanium and surgical steel. The house is too big for one old man, but I've started hosting Sunday dinners for Earl and his family, for the guys from the shop who still remember when I was Big Tom Harrison who could rebuild any engine in Texas. Sometimes I walk past the courthouse where everything changed, where justice wore a black robe and spoke with Judge Thompson's voice, where my son learned that some debts can't be forgiven only paid. The money's mostly gone now. Medical bills, charity, a trust fund for Taylor that she doesn't know about yet. But I'm alive. Against all odds, against my own son's wishes, I'm alive. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not the lawsuit or the prison time or the public humiliation, but the simple, stubborn act of continuing to breathe when someone you loved told you to stop. Living well, they say, is the best revenge. But sometimes, just living is enough. Every family has a breaking point. The moment when love becomes obligation, when obligation becomes resentment, when resentment becomes betrayal. Tom Harrison found his breaking point at 72, with 8 weeks to live and a son who'd rather inherit than invest. But this story isn't really about Tom. It's about you. About the promises you've made and the ones made to you. About the family you choose versus the family you're given. About what you'd do if the person you die for wouldn't pay to help you live. Subscribe to this channel. Not because I'm asking, but because somewhere someone needs to hear this story. Someone is sitting with their own diagnosis, their own betrayal, their own impossible choice. Share this with them. Let them know they're not alone. And if you're watching this thinking Tom went too far, ask yourself one question. How far would you go to save your own life? The answer might surprise you. Or, maybe like David Harrison learned too late, it might destroy you.
Thank you for watching. Comments are open below. Tell us what time it is where you are and whether you think Tom did the right thing. Your story matters too.